So now to join us to chat about this new edition of the Quality Handbook, among other topics, is Joe DeFeo, who, in addition to editing the book, is also the CEO of Duran Global. So Joe, welcome back to Quality Digest Live.
Thank you, guys, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Nice festive red shirt there. Thank you for
nice shirt.
Thank you for that.
I thought I'd try a little bit of color instead of the old boring blue and whites.
That's right. Well, thanks, Joe. All right. Well, let's start off with your opinion about something. So, why, in your opinion, is now a good time to bring forth this latest edition of Duran's Quality Handbook?
Well, historically, it published about every 10 years, and in that 10-year period, it was enough time to offer something valuable and something new. When my first edition was the third, I participated in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and each one, the change that was going on in our subject matter was happening faster and faster. So when we completed the last one, McGraw-Hill, our publisher, said, I told them, I said, I'm only going to do it if we can publish something faster. And they were very happy about that. So we tried to get it out in 6 or 7 years. You know, keep in mind, today a book like that is kind of hard to come by because who wants 1,000 pages? But what we find is that some people do want to keep that 1,000 pages, have everything in their hands. And so we continued it, and we have something new to offer, and we'll keep continuing it.
And Joe, I mean, I gotta think that it must have been pretty humbling, you know, to go through the work of really this great man. I mean, Joseph Duran, and he was your mentor, and you've gone through and you've updated it for today's class of quality leaders. I mean, what did that feel like to have that responsibility?
Well, you know, no one would argue whatever Dr. Duran wrote down, but everybody would argue what everybody else wrote. So one is getting criticized from him, you know, making sure you write like him, or now trying to write like him without him, you know, helping you along, is not too easy. So what you try to do is not be him, but try to live up to his principles, and that is try to be as factual as you can, try not to think of everything yourself, include as many experts as you can, and sometimes you end up with a gem. And I hope we can continue with those gems along the way. And you know, our subject matter keeps changing and evolving. We haven't had 100 years to practice this stuff, so it's also hard to identify what's most important to the reader today in one book versus what they can find in 1,000 other sources online.
Joe, I mentioned Juran's Quality Trilogy, which really was a breakthrough idea when it first was introduced by Dr. Duran several decades ago. And this is an idea that's really still very, very relevant. So why do you think that this concept really remains such a foundational part of organizations' quality?
You know, my belief is that, you know, Dr. Duran was very pragmatic. He didn't sit down and pen this trilogy thing. He was working within quality control, and he realized that inspecting items and controlling processes were only as good as the design of those products and services. And so he started to monitor and watch what was happening on the design side, and he found some fascinating things that once a product is introduced into operations, the designers move on to the next iteration. So his first opportunity to improve what came out of control of goods was the improvement of goods. And by trying to understand what causes defects and what causes deficiencies, he was able to then say, go back to the designers and say, fix these. So initially, he was in the world of quality control, and that's the way it was. But he realized that you couldn't do total control without improvement, and you couldn't improve everything to the level of perfection without design. So he had two publications, one that articulated in 1954 with Managerial Breakthrough, that if you think about quality of control and quality of improvement, you'll get far. And then by the time the 80s came along, and I believe it was around 1986, he published that paper and said, no, there's actually three elements to managing, and that is control, improvement, and design or planning. And as a result, he created that term, the Juran Trilogy. And my belief is that one reason that it's popular, it's easy to get your arms around if you're a leader, because the big question is, if you get the fact that you want to be a well-performing, high-performing organization. You want the best goods and services. How do you do it? Well, you don't do it just because you take a lean course or a Six Sigma course or get a quality engineer. You do it by understanding the customer requirements and designing the features in. You design operational capabilities in so that you can produce or deliver the goods and service. Then you control it at the least amount of pain, and then you continuously improve it. So it just became a natural management process that you design, you control, and you improve. And he even went so far later in life to saying, you know, my intention, it wasn't supposed to be quality planning, quality control, and quality improvement, but it really is about business planning, business control, and business improvement. And it can apply to itself. You can improve the trilogy by understanding how to implement a quality management system better by designing it better, how to manage it over time better by controlling it. So it kind of kept evolving, and I think that's why it stays where it is today, because it's easy to get your arms around it.
Well, it's well said, and I think it represents kind of why that is so timeless, and that's exactly right. The problems that managers had then and the problems that they're having now are very similar, but the world itself is very different now than it was when the handbook first came out. Gosh, it's like 7 decades ago almost now. So how does one apply the lessons of Duran in an era that includes things like big data or international supply chains or automation?
Yeah, so the first thing is that there's no prescription. So, you know, the one thing that folks need to realize is that you're not going to find a prescription that says if you're in a pharmaceutical company, do this. If you're manufacturing, do this. If you're financial, do this. Or if you're healthcare, do this. It says, how can you, if you want to have a strategy based on high customer performing products and services, this is what you can do. You can design better, you can control better, you can improve better. In order to do that, you should have a good strategy based on customers and excellence. In order to do that, you need leadership. In order to do that, you need et cetera, et cetera. So what the book contains is a set of what Duran called compendium of knowledge that you could use to build your own system, because everybody's at a different place. And, you know, let's face it, it was a manufacturing-driven methodology which migrated into non-manufacturing, and now it really just exists in the world of data. So the real, you know, heart of a quality management system or a good business management system is getting good information to make good business decisions on. Well, good information comes from good data. And good data is just what that means, good data. So whether you have 10 data points, 20 data points, or a billion data points a second, you need to interpret that data. Historically, you know, we were able to count 25 data points and be able to determine its controllability. Today, when you're getting a billion data points in split seconds, you know, which 25 data points do you count? So one, the methodologies are not data exclusive, but in today's big data world, which we try to discuss in here, is that you really have to understand what you're trying to solve and what piece of that data is going to help you do it. And what it's really getting down to is, you know, measurement system capability, how you sample, what you sample, is becoming more and more important. So we try to put our emphasis better on more on measurement system capability. If you think of the U.S. election recently, you know, one could theorize, why were the polls off? Well, a lot of the polls are not all conducted with big data thinking in mind. They've been based on small data thinking. And so I wonder how many errors were made by interpreting a population with so few people. And so in the handbook, you know, we treat data as all data, but we also treat big data, which means a lot of data coming at you fast it has to be interpreted properly. Let me give you one anecdote. I left the healthcare improvement section out of the handbook this time because healthcare is just, you know, so different, but yet the same, but it needs its own language. So we're going to be doing a healthcare quality book. And ASQ already had one anyway, and there's a lot of folks having them. But I was sitting in a research meeting once, and it may sound horrible, but they were looking at data coming from bacteria that's in our intestines. And the question was, where in our intestines do they get the sample, and will that sample be representative? Because every inch of our intestines could be something different. And that's how you have to think about your population. You know, 25 data points coming from every foot of an intestine may not be the same representative sample of every inch. So really interpreting the data gets you to understanding measurement system capability. It really gets you to knowing what information you want.
Well, Joe,
my big fear is everybody wants to interpret all the big data as big data instead of really digging into what you really need and mine that data properly.
Well, Joe, I think that's a good place to leave it right there. I wanted to remind everybody the book is out now. This is, of course, the Duran Quality Handbook, Edition 7 from McGraw-Hill. Joe, thanks for joining us today, giving us a little perspective on Dr. Duran's legacy. And we encourage everyone out there to check out the book. And Joe, thanks again for joining us today on
Thanks,
Quality
guys.
Legislation.
I appreciate your opportunity.
Hey, talk to you soon, Joe. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.